So authenticity, again, is tuned into, in general, the function is tuned into the resonance inside, the motivations, the core values, the intention of action, the impact that we make, and the intention toward that impact. So I think this is where, and by the way, this is a strength or a preferred function for all FPs in the Myers-Briggs system.
Right. It's really, I would say its core is self-intimacy, right? It's like, it's a desire to understand like not just intentions, but my intentions, right? It's like a very personal experience one has with oneself. And so it's my values, my intentions, my conscience, my perspective built on a lifetime of my lived experience as a person.
Knowing the self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't mean that everybody who uses this function, even as a preferred function, is, really super self-aware. I mean, I can think of people who have this as a first function that lack what I would call self-awareness, but I'm only seeing them in a social context, right? Like, I don't know what their private thoughts are with themselves. They appear to lack self-awareness because of how they show up, but that's not the same thing. They might actually be quite tapped in to at least how they're feeling about things, minimum how they're feeling. And then the goal, as the function, develops and matures, is to not just know how one feels, but also how that drives them, how that motivates them, and what their likes and dislikes are. Like the things that bring, pull them towards and are attractive, and the things that push them away, and what that says about them. And so it's really about, it's about me, right? And what's going on for me. So there's a more, just like with all the functions, there's a more analytic and a more holistic version. So let's talk about the analytic version of it, introverted feeling. There's the word that, or the name that Dario chose for the analytic version of introverted feeling is the quester. So I find this really interesting that quest is a word that he chose.
By the way, side note, you should join the quest this week. We're launching very shortly to talk about this episode, and then we're going to unpack it. Breakout sessions, journaling, a challenge this week.
Yeah, there's the analytic extroverted intuition or exploration.
I like this word, quester. It speaks to the program we just launched recently.
It's about pursuing a particular singular life quest or truth, and choices and habits being organized around it.
Yeah.
So just like with the analytic introverted thinking or accuracy, which we talked about in the previous podcast, having like basically a mental model or a model and being very stubborn on those principles around that. This is about having a quest, a purpose. This is the thing that I'm dedicating my life to, and everything else gets organized around it. So there's almost like a missionary feel about it.
By the way, we are starting something very new here at Personality Hacker. Now, you might be listening to this years from now, and so it's something that's gone on for a while. But as of the time of this recording, it's fairly new. We're starting up an experience of our podcast live once a week online in a virtual format. So what we're doing is we're gathering a group of like minds to come together once a week to watch this podcast together. And then right afterward, we have a membership program where people can come. It's called a personality quest. And we talk about the podcast right afterward. We unpack the learning from it, how we can apply it to our lives. And then we give the entire group of people that have gathered an assignment or a challenge for that week, some journal prompts and some reflection, but also a challenge that week to go test out in their real life, to go explore in the world. All of us are going to do the same challenge that week. And we come back the following week, we talk about it, unpack it, and we get the learning from it. And every week getting together to do this, we've already been doing a few weeks. It's been fantastic. I've loved doing it. It's awesome to see people come and gather live to watch the podcast, talk about it, and go do challenges in their own lives. You should be a part of this. If you're listening or you're watching, we want you to be part of it. Currently, we're doing it on Sundays. You can find out more information to be part of Personality Quest if you come over to personalityhacker.com/quest, and you can learn all about the quests and what we're doing there and get yourself involved, because I think you're going to love this experience, especially if you've loved the podcast and you love personality types and personal growth and the intersection of those two things. It's one of the things that I am super excited about going forward with. So, and there's going to be some live elements to that. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we've got planned around this. But right now we're just starting with these weekly gatherings, and I'd love for you to be involved. Dude, my dad has ISFP preferences. He and my mom started an organization that they literally have the name Crusade in their official name of it.
Mhm.
Like back in the 1970s, it was called Christian Youth Crusade.
Mhm.
This idea of crusade, I think he's got analytic, introverted feeling or authenticity. And it was always about crusading for God. And it was very single-minded. I mean, he's still single-minded. And I grew up in this environment. It was like, that's what my introverted feeling or authenticity thought you had to do. You had to pick something and be on a mission for it.
Yeah.
And you'll either get there or you'll die trying. I think that's really the energy baked into this.
Well, and their public facing name even has the word quest in it.
Yeah.
Right. And so their official, the name has Crusade and their public facing name has Quest.
Yeah.
And so
I never even connected those two until just now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So they have
like even his organization is a shadow of how analytic his introverted feeling or authenticity is.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I never put those two together.
Yeah. And actually what's interesting is that there's so much clarity around the quest or the crusade, usually for people that have analytic. And maybe we should use examples that don't feel so missionary and religious oriented in just a moment, but usually there's so much clarity around that they can score or test as thinking types because it doesn't feel emotional. It just feels deep, right? It feels deep, profound, and important.
Well, there's tons of Hollywood actors. Who's the guy? I mean, I'm not going to talk about anything specific that he's focused on driving forward or what he cares about, but I would just say, Sean Penn. I would say Sean Penn. I don't care if he's an introverted feeling or authenticity user. He feels like a person that has analytic, introverted feeling or authenticity. When he has a cause or something he's toward, he's like single-minded, almost to an absurd level. Like he can't let any other information come in. He's just focused on it and like embodies every aspect of it. And he just like lives in this congruent, like I will die or this thing will happen framework.
Yep. Yeah. And actually,
Joan of Arc energy, I guess. Yeah.
And that consistency of showing up and having everything be filtered through the things that are important to them is one of the symbols of an analytic, introverted feeling or authenticity user.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the symbols of an analytic, extroverted feeling and harmony user too. The analytic types or feeling functions, they tend to have very consistent, I could call them personas, right? Their interface with the outside world. They show up the same in every context or situation because they are standing for these values that are almost outside of themselves, but for introverted feeling, feel like themselves. Whereas the holistic versions, and we'll talk about holistic introverted feeling or authenticity in a moment, they're way more flexible. Like holistic extroverted feeling or harmony that we just talked about, it because it's interfacing with the individual and kind of trying to figure out what their needs are, it can almost feel like a chameleon. They can look very different from person to person because they're showing up to meet that person's needs. Whereas the analytic version will show up for the values, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with introverted feeling because everything is being filtered through, like are my actions, beliefs, feelings, relationships, habits, and so on all consistent regardless of what kind of situation I'm in, right? Am I acting 100% consistent and usually consistent with the thing that I think is important with my crusade or my quest? And that makes them usually show up the exact same no matter where they go. An example, and I had forgotten that Dario had put this in, so I'm just going to read it because I think it's so good. It might not be somebody who's religious necessarily. It might be, say, a musician. He says, think of an ISFP who is utterly devoted to a singular practice, music. He or she will say, it's all about the music, even though fame, fun, money, and travel are part of the experience too. They believe, maybe fear, that their music will be fake and they will fail if they're not dedicated to a raw honesty.
Yeah.
So it's all about the music. And if they get at all distracted by anything else, that will take them off of the crusade, right?
It's a great example. Yeah.
So that's not like a mission or a religion or politics or anything. It's just music, but it still has that single-minded focus and trying to honor that, the thing that's so important.
Yep.
So they usually come across as really dedicated. They might be kind of black and white and maybe even judgmental. But they're usually capable of a lot of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the introverted feeling, like analytic introverted feeling tends to have more success because they are so driven and because they are so single-minded. And oftentimes, single-minded determination is one of the key nodes in the system of success. So these are the types that tend to have a little bit more success in their life.
Yeah.
Yep.